You know how some days you wake up and think to yourself, gee, I wonder what fresh hell awaits me today? Well, Captain Jake Morrison had stopped wondering about 3 weeks ago when he'd been abducted by aliens who apparently had never heard of the Geneva Convention, or basic hospitality, or deodorant, judging by the smell wafting through the detention facility. The Zephyrian Collective had decided that humans were a curious anomaly that required thorough examination before potential elimination, which was corporate speak for we're going to poke you with sticks until you tell us why you're so weird, then probably vaporize you anyway. Commander Vextar stood before the holding cell, and all 7 feet of purple-scaled arrogance wrapped in what looked like a military uniform designed by someone who'd only heard leather described secondhand. His multiple eyes blinked in sequence like a broken traffic light, and when he spoke, his voice had that particular quality that suggested he'd been practicing his villainous monologue in the mirror. Humans, he began, because apparently these aliens had never heard of subtle interrogation techniques your species has proven most but resilient to our standard psychological evaluation methods. Jake snorted from his corner of the cell. Yeah, well, you guys haven't exactly brought your A game. The whole scary alien overlord thing loses its impact when you keep tripping over your own tail. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who'd been quietly hyperventilating in the opposite corner for the better part of an hour, looked up with wild eyes. Maybe if we just cooperate. Elena, honey, they literally told us they're planning to eliminate us. Cooperation isn't exactly going to earn us a frequent flyer upgrade. The third member of their little group sat cross-legged on the floor, apparently unbothered by their predicament. 12-year-old Mia Thompson had been on the research vessel as part of a Bring Your Daughter to Work day that had gone spectacularly wrong. She was currently braiding her hair and humming what sounded suspiciously like the theme from a cartoon about magical ponies. The child appears unaffected by her circumstances, Vextar observed, his tail twitching with what Jake had learned was the alien equivalent of confusion. Kids are weird, Jake replied. Also, she's probably in shock. People process trauma differently. Mia looked up with the kind of expression that suggested she was processing trauma just fine, thank you very much. Are we done with the boring talking part? Because I'm hungry. And this place smells like my uncle's fish tank after he forgot to clean it for 3 months. Vextar's multiple eyes focused on her with the intensity of someone trying to solve a particularly annoying puzzle. Fascinating. The juvenile displays no fear response whatsoever. Yeah, well, she's 12. They're basically tiny psychopaths at that age. The commander turned back to his subordinates, a collection of lizard-like beings who looked like they'd flunked out of intimidation school. Deploy the dread beast. If standard interrogation fails, we shall break their minds with terror itself. Elena whimpered. Jake felt his stomach drop. And Mia asked, Ooh, is it like a scary monster? Cool. The aliens exchanged glances that clearly said what the hell is wrong with these creatures in whatever passes for facial expressions when you have compound eyes and scales. The dread beast. Vextar explained with the kind of dramatic flair that suggested he'd been waiting his entire career for this moment, is a creature of pure nightmare. It feeds on fear, shapes itself into your deepest terrors, and has broken the minds of 1,000 different species across the galaxy. So it's like therapy, but worse, Jake muttered. Much worse, the commander confirmed with satisfaction. Prepare the containment field. Let us see how long human sanity endures when confronted with the embodiment of their own psychological demons. As the aliens bustled around activating whatever passed for monster deployment technology, Jake found himself wondering if there was a customer service department for alien abductions, because this whole experience was definitely earning a 1-star review. The first sign that their day was about to get significantly worse came in the form of a sound that could best be described as what nightmares would sound like if they could gargle. It echoed through the detention facility like someone had fed a synthesizer a steady diet of horror movie soundtracks and existential dread. Well, Jake said, pressing himself against the back wall of their cell, this seems ominous. The containment field flickered and died with a sound like a computer having a nervous breakdown. What emerged from the darkness beyond their cell was something that made Jake's brain file a formal complaint with his eyes for looking at it in the first place. The dread beast was not so much a creature as it was a living violation of several laws of physics, and at least one warranty agreement. It flowed more than walked, its form shifting and writhing like smoke made of pure malice. When it focused on Jake, the air around it shimmered, and suddenly he wasn't looking at some cosmic horror anymore. He was looking at the biggest damn spider he'd ever seen in his life. "Oh, come on," Jake whispered, his voice climbing several octaves. "Really? We're doing the giant spider thing?" The creature had apparently done its homework, because this wasn't just any giant spider. This was the exact giant spider that had haunted Jake's nightmares since he was 7 years old, and had made the mistake of watching a nature documentary about Australian wildlife. 8 legs the size of tree trunks, fangs that dripped with something that was probably not chocolate sauce, and eyes that reflected his terror back at him like funhouse mirrors. Jake's knees decided they were no longer interested in supporting his weight. Meanwhile, the beast turned its attention to Dr. Rodriguez, and the spider dissolved into something even worse. Elena found herself face to face with a massive projection screen displaying her greatest failure, the research data that had gotten their entire expedition captured. Every mistake, every miscalculation, every moment of doubt she'd ever had as a scientist materialized before her in excruciating detail. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, collapsing to her knees. "I'm so sorry, I should have been better, I should have seen the signs, I should have." The psychological breakdown proceeds as expected, Commander Vextar observed from the safety of his monitoring station. Human mental fortitude appears laughably inadequate. His subordinates chittered in agreement, which was the Zephyrian equivalent of applause. They'd placed bets on how long it would take the humans to completely crack, and the over-under was looking pretty generous right about now. But then the dread beast turned to Mia. The creature paused, its form rippling with uncertainty. It probed at her mind, searching for the fears that would give it shape and substance. It found the usual catalog of childhood anxieties: fear of the dark, fear of being alone, fear of disappointing her parents, fear of global warming, fear that her favorite TV show would get cancelled. Standard nightmare fuel, really. The beast shifted, taking the form of a massive shadowy figure looming over her. Mia looked up at it with the kind of expression usually reserved for mildly interesting zoo exhibits. "Huh," she said. "You're smaller than I expected." The creature froze. In its thousands of years of existence across hundreds of different worlds and species, nobody had ever called it small. It tried again, shifting into the form of a writhing mass of tentacles and teeth. "Oh, neat," Mia said, clapping her hands. "You can change shapes. Do you do requests? Can you do a dinosaur?" The dread beast made a sound like confusion mixed with mild panic. This was not how this was supposed to go. Fear was supposed to feed it, empower it, give it the psychic energy it needed to maintain its terrifying form. But this small human was looking at it like it was some kind of carnival attraction. From the monitoring station, Commander Vextar leaned forward, his tail twitching rapidly. "What is happening? Why is the beast not consuming the juvenile's fear?" "Sir," one of his subordinates reported, checking his readings with the kind of panic usually reserved for discovering your parachute is actually a backpack full of kitchen utensils. "I'm detecting no fear response from the human child whatsoever." "That's impossible. The dread beast has never failed to." "Actually," Mia interrupted, somehow managing to project her voice through the containment field, "I have a question. Do you eat regular food or just scary feelings? Because I have some crackers in my pocket if you're hungry." The dread beast stared at her with all the composure of a cosmic horror that had just been offered a snack by its intended victim. The silence that followed Mia's offer stretched on for several seconds, which in cosmic horror terms was roughly equivalent to a geological epoch. The dread beast continued to stare at her, its form wavering between various attempts at terrifying and what could only be described as confused. "Crackers?" it finally asked, and its voice was like the sound of a thunderstorm having an identity crisis. "Yeah." Mia reached into her pocket and pulled out a small package of animal crackers. "They're shaped like zebras." "Well, they're supposed to be zebras. Honestly, the quality control on these things is pretty questionable." Jake, still pressed against the wall and trying to convince his nervous system that the giant spider was gone, watched this exchange with the kind of fascination usually reserved for natural disasters. "Mia, honey, maybe don't feed the nightmare monster." "Why not? He seems nice." "It literally just tried to terrorize us into insanity." "Yeah, but that's probably just his job. I bet nobody ever asked him what he actually wants to do." The dread beast tilted what might have been its head, if heads were concepts that applied to beings made of living shadow and poor life choices. "What I want to do?" Commander Vextar's tail was now twitching so rapidly it was approaching escape velocity. "This is not proceeding according to protocol. The beast is designed to feed on fear, not engage in philosophical discussions with human juveniles." "Sir," his subordinate reported, his voice climbing toward panic, "the beast's fear consumption levels are dropping rapidly. Its physical manifestation is becoming unstable." Indeed, the creature was beginning to lose its coherent form. Without fear to feed on, it was like a campfire running out of fuel, flickering and wavering as it struggled to maintain its existence. "I've never been asked that before," the beast admitted, its voice becoming less thunderstorm and more gentle rainfall. "For thousands of years I have been unleashed upon species after species, feeding on their terror, breaking their minds. But what I want to do?" Mia nodded encouragingly. "Everybody should get to choose what they want to do. That's like basic stuff." I think the creature paused, its form stabilizing into something less aggressively terrifying and more generally unsettling. "I think I would like to try not being feared for once." Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her breakdown long enough to stare. Did the cosmic horror just have an existential awakening? "Looks like it," Jake said, slowly peeling himself off the wall. "And all it took was a 12-year-old with snacks." "The power of therapy crackers," Mia said solemnly, offering the package to the beast. "My mom always says food makes everything better." The creature extended something that might have been a tentacle, might have been an arm, and might have been a philosophical concept given physical form. It gently took a cracker, examining it with the kind of wonder usually reserved for discovering fire. "A zebra," it said softly. "Well, supposedly. I think it looks more like a horse that got lost." "I have never seen a zebra. Or a horse." "Really? Oh man, you're missing out. There's this thing called the internet that has like all the animals ever. We should totally look stuff up together if we get out of here." From the monitoring station came the sound of Commander Vextar having what could charitably be called a complete meltdown. "The beast is bonding with the human. This is unprecedented. This is catastrophic. This is really sweet, actually," one of his subordinates observed. Vextar turned all 7 of his eyes on the hapless underling. "Sweet? Sweet? We have just witnessed the corruption of our most powerful psychological weapon by a human child armed with processed flour and artificial flavoring. Sir, perhaps we should consider alternative approaches." "No, deploy the neural inhibitors. Flood the chamber with terror-inducing pheromones. I don't care what it takes, that creature will resume its intended function." But as various alarms began blaring and emergency protocols activated, the dread beast did something that made every alien in the facility question their life choices. It moved closer to Mia, its form shifting into something almost protective, and made a sound that could only be described as a cosmic horror purring. The alien facility's emergency lighting cast everything in an ominous red glow that would have been much more effective at creating atmosphere if the dread beast hadn't been sitting on the floor like an enormous, otherworldly puppy while Mia scratched what might have been its head. "There you go," she said in the same tone she usually reserved for the neighbor's golden retriever. "Who's a good cosmic horror?" "You are." "Yes, you are." Jake rubbed his eyes, wondering if being terrorized into insanity might have actually been preferable to whatever this was. "I'm pretty sure there's a manual somewhere that explicitly warns against bonding with entities of pure nightmare." "Probably the same manual that says don't feed the animals at the zoo," Mia replied, pulling another cracker from her seemingly infinite supply. "But look how happy he is." The creature, which had apparently decided that Buddy was an acceptable designation for something that had spent millennia breaking the minds of civilizations, made a sound like contentment filtered through a black hole. Its form had stabilized into something that was still obviously otherworldly but significantly less about to devour your sanity and more large, friendly dog made of living shadow. "Buddy is a terrible name for a dread beast," Elena said, finally emerging from her corner now that her greatest fears had been replaced by the surreal sight of a child domesticating cosmic horror. "All names are terrible when you really think about them," Mia pointed out. "Like what even is a Jake? Or an Elena? Or a Commander Vextar the Merciless?" "The Merciless?" Jake raised an eyebrow. "I added that part. It seemed to fit." From the monitoring station, Commander Vextar was indeed living up to his new title, though his mercilessness was currently being directed at his own control panels. Neural inhibitors ineffective. Terror pheromones completely ignored. The beast responds only to the human child. "Sir," his subordinate ventured, "perhaps we should consider that this represents a unique opportunity for research." "Research? Research?" Vextar's tail whipped around so violently it knocked over a chair. "That child has weaponized friendship. She has turned our most feared asset into a therapy animal," the subordinate suggested. Vextar made a sound like a kettle achieving enlightenment through screaming. Meanwhile, in the holding cell, Mia was discovering just how far her new friendship could go. "Buddy, can you make the force field thingy go away? It's kind of cramped in here." The dread beast turned toward the containment barrier, and for a moment its form rippled with something approaching its old menace. The energy field flickered, sparked, and died with a whimper that suggested even the technology was embarrassed to be involved in this situation. "Excellent." Mia climbed to her feet and brushed cracker crumbs off her clothes. "Now, I don't suppose you know the way out of this place." Buddy's form shifted, growing more solid and defined. What had been vague shadows coalesced into something that might have been arms, might have been tentacles, but were definitely pointing down the corridor. "The beast knows every inch of this facility," Jake realized. "It's been deployed here for years." "Decades," Buddy corrected, its voice now sounding less like a natural disaster and more like a very large person with a cold. "I have been kept in the lower levels, released only when the commander requires his prisoners to be broken." "Well, that's horrible," Mia said with the matter-of-fact tone of someone who had apparently adopted moral outrage as her default setting. "Nobody should have to live like that. We should definitely complain to management." "I think we are about to have that opportunity," Elena said, pointing down the corridor where the sound of approaching boots suggested that Commander Vextar had decided to handle the situation personally. "Oh good," Jake muttered. "I was wondering when we'd get to the part where everything goes completely sideways." "More sideways," Elena corrected. "Fair point." Buddy's form rippled again, and suddenly the creature that had spent the last hour learning about friendship and zebra-shaped crackers remembered exactly what it was capable of when something threatened the first being in millennia to show it kindness. The sound it made was not a purr. Commander Vextar rounded the corner at precisely the wrong moment to witness what happened when a dread beast decided to take the concept of loyalty seriously. The last coherent thought he managed before his own deepest fears materialized around him was a fervent wish that he had taken that nice, the safe job in interstellar accounting his mother had suggested. The beautiful thing about cosmic horrors, Jake reflected as he watched Buddy systematically terrorize their captors, was their complete commitment to whatever task they set their minds to. When Buddy had been trying to break their sanity, it had been thorough, efficient, and absolutely terrifying. Now that it had decided to protect Mia, it was applying the same level of professional dedication to making the alien guards question every life choice that had led them to this moment. "Is it wrong that I'm enjoying this?" Elena asked. Watching Commander Vextar flee down the corridor while being chased by what appeared to be a giant version of his own mother wielding a disapproving expression and a lecture about his life choices. "Probably," Jake replied, "but I'm going to file it under justified workplace satisfaction." Mia, meanwhile, had climbed onto Buddy's back like she was riding the world's most eldritch pony. "This is so much better than the field trip to the planetarium. Can we visit the cafeteria? I want to see what aliens eat." "The cafeteria is 3 levels down," Buddy rumbled, its voice now carrying undertones of barely contained violence directed at anyone who wasn't a 12-year-old human with snack crackers. "I shall clear the path." Clear the path turned out to be Buddy's polite way of saying systematically introduce the facility staff to their own personal hells. As they made their way through the corridors, Jake got to witness the impressive sight of beings who had spent their careers terrorizing other species suddenly discovering what it felt like to be on the receiving end of the existential dread. One guard found himself face to face with a performance review conducted by every supervisor he'd ever disappointed. Another encountered a manifestation of his mother-in-law asking why he never called anymore. A third simply curled up in a corner and began sobbing about his unfulfilled dreams of becoming a professional artist. "I'm starting to think these aliens have some serious psychological issues," Jake observed. "Most people do," Mia said pragmatically. "That's why therapy exists, although I don't think they have therapy for being terrorized by your own fear monster." "There's probably a market for it," Elena added. "Post-traumatic cosmic horror syndrome." They reached the cafeteria without encountering any organized resistance, but mostly because the facility's staff had discovered that running away while screaming was a surprisingly effective strategy for dealing with their current situation. The cafeteria itself turned out to be a disappointment, featuring what appeared to be the galactic equivalent of institutional food served in portions that suggested the aliens had never quite grasped the concept of adequate nutrition. "This is worse than school lunch," Mia declared after examining a tray of something that might have been vegetables if vegetables could achieve sentience and immediately regret the experience. "No wonder they're all so cranky." "Poor dietary choices do tend to affect mood," Elena agreed. "Although that doesn't excuse the whole kidnapping and psychological torture thing." "Nothing excuses that," Buddy said. And there was something in its voice that suggested several facility staff members were about to have very unpleasant encounters with their own consciences. "For too long, I have been a tool of their cruelty. But no more." "Good for you." Mia patted what might have been Buddy's neck. "Standing up to bullies is important. Although maybe we should focus on getting out of here before they call for backup?" Jake, who had been examining the facility schematics on a nearby wall display, looked up with the expression of someone who had just realized they were standing in the middle of a particularly elaborate mouse trap. "Speaking of backup, I'm reading at least 3 more ships incoming. We need to find a way off this station, and we need to do it fast." "The docking bay is on level 7, Buddy reported. But it is heavily guarded." "How heavily?" Elena asked. "Heavily enough that it would normally be impossible to reach." "And now?" "Now." Buddy's form rippled with what Jake was learning to recognize as the cosmic horror equivalent of a smile. It was not a reassuring expression, but given their current circumstances, Jake found he didn't particularly care about reassuring. "Now," Buddy said, "they will learn what it means to face their own monster." The Zephyrian docking bay had been designed with security in mind, which meant it featured approximately 17 different ways to kill, maim, or psychologically scar anyone who tried to access it without proper authorization. What it hadn't been designed for was a dread beast that had decided to take the concept of protective friendship very seriously indeed. "You know," Jake said, stepping over the twitching form of a guard who appeared to be having an in-depth conversation with a hallucination about his failure to call his mother more often, "I'm starting to think we might actually get out of this alive." "Don't jinx it," Elena muttered, though she was eyeing the various alien spacecraft with the expression of someone who had spent years dreaming of getting her hands on xenotech. "Oh my God, is that a gravity inversion drive? Do you know what we could learn from?" "Elena," Jake interrupted gently, "maybe save the scientific enthusiasm until after we're not in mortal danger." "Right, yes, escape first, revolutionary discovery second." Mia, still riding Buddy like she was competing in the galaxy's most unusual rodeo, pointed toward a sleek ship near the far end of the bay. "That one looks fast, and it's got racing stripes." "Those are not racing stripes," Buddy rumbled. "Those are tactical markings indicating a high-speed reconnaissance vessel." "Even better. Racing stripes that mean business." As they made their way toward the ship, the facility's remaining security forces made one last attempt to stop them. Commander Vex Tar himself emerged from behind a cargo container, wielding what appeared to be some kind of energy weapon, and accompanied by the few guards who hadn't been reduced to quivering psychological wrecks. "Enough," he bellowed, his multiple eyes blazing with fury and what Jake suspected was a significant amount of stimulants. "You will not escape with our most valuable asset." "Valuable asset?" Mia looked confused. "You mean Buddy?" "The dread beast has served the Zephyrian Collective for centuries. It is irreplaceable." "He's not an it," Mia said, and her voice carried the kind of righteous indignation that had toppled governments and launched 1,000 parent-teacher conferences. "He's a person with feelings, and you've been keeping him locked up and making him do awful things, and that's just mean." Vex Tar raised his weapon. "Sentimental human nonsense will not." He never got to finish the sentence, because Buddy had apparently decided that threatening Mia crossed several lines that should never be crossed by anyone who wanted to maintain their sanity, their dignity, or their ability to sleep without nightmares for the rest of their natural lives. What happened next was something that Jake would later describe to therapists as the most comprehensively terrifying 30 seconds of my life, and I once had to sit through a 4-hour budget meeting. When the smoke cleared and the screaming stopped, Commander Vex Tar and his remaining guards were huddled in the corner, sobbing and asking each other if anyone remembered how to make their childhood security blankets. Buddy, meanwhile, had returned to his gentle, protective demeanor as if nothing had happened. "Was that necessary?" Elena asked. "They threatened Mia," Buddy replied, as if this explained everything. Which Jake supposed it did. "Fair enough. Now, about that ship." Getting the reconnaissance vessel operational turned out to be surprisingly simple, mostly because alien technology apparently operated on the principle that if you pressed enough buttons in the right order, eventually something would work. Elena's years of xenotech research proved invaluable. Jake's military training handled the navigation systems, and Mia provided moral support by feeding Buddy more crackers and explaining the plot of her favorite cartoon show. So then Princess Sparkle Rainbow has to decide between saving the Crystal Kingdom or protecting her friends, she was saying as Jake fired up the engines, but it turns out friendship is magic, so she can do both. "Fascinating," Buddy rumbled. "Your species creates narrative entertainment based on the premise that positive social bonds can overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles." "Well, yeah. Doesn't everyone?" "No, most species create entertainment based on violence, conquest, and the futility of existence." "That sounds boring." "It is." As they cleared the docking bay and accelerated toward open space, Jake found himself looking back at the detention facility with something approaching fondness. Not for the experience, which had been universally terrible, but for the reminder that sometimes the universe had a sense of humor. "So," Elena said, settling into the co-pilot's seat, "what do we do about Buddy? I mean, he can't exactly come back to Earth with us." "Why not?" Mia asked. "He's my friend now. Friends stick together." "Well, for one thing, he's a cosmic horror that feeds on fear and can drive people insane by existing near them. He doesn't do that anymore. He's reformed. Right, Buddy?" "I find that I no longer require fear for sustenance," Buddy confirmed. "Friendship appears to be surprisingly nutritious." Jake rubbed his temples. "I can already see the paperwork on this one. Mission report. Successfully escaped alien detention facility. Casualties 0. Psychological trauma moderate. Adopted cosmic horrors 1. Don't forget the crackers," Mia added. "Those were important too." "Right. Emergency rations proved crucial to diplomatic breakthrough." As Earth grew larger in the view screen, Jake found himself wondering what his superiors were going to make of their new passenger. On one hand, Buddy represented an unprecedented opportunity for xenobiological research. On the other hand, he was a creature of living nightmare who had spent centuries breaking the minds of various species across the galaxy. On the third hand, he apparently really liked animal crackers and had declared himself Mia's personal guardian, which struck Jake as the kind of character reference that would carry significant weight in any reasonable legal system. "You know what?" Jake said finally. "I think this is going to work out just fine." "Of course it will," Mia replied, scratching Buddy behind what might have been an ear. "We're friends now, and friends always figure things out together." Behind them, the Zephyrian detention facility grew smaller and smaller until it was just another speck of light against the stars, full of very confused aliens who were going to have some very interesting reports to file with their superiors. And somewhere in the depths of space, a little girl, her unlikely friend, and two very tired adults headed home to a universe that was about to become a much more interesting place. After all, Jake thought, if humans were good at anything, it was making friends in the most improbable circumstances and then somehow making it work. Even when those friends happened to be reformed cosmic horrors with a weakness for snack foods and children's television.